Hi, and welcome to Assessment 2, the comparison of numeracy intervention programs. The programs being discussed today are Targeted Early Numeracy, or TEN, and Taking Off with Numeracy, or TOWN. These programs were chosen for the intervention as they are both currently supported by the New South Wales Department of Education and are being realigned as mathematics building blocks for numeracy. These two intervention programs also link to the Plotting Literacy and Numeracy 2, or Plan 2 learning progressions. The Australian Curriculum and Assessment Authority states that these progressions are a sequence of observable indicators of increasingly sophisticated understanding of and skills in key numeracy concepts. As such, it makes sense to discuss two intervention strategies that can be integrated within existing teaching, learning, and assessment frameworks. Both of these programs have their roots in the Count Me In and Count Me In 2 programs from the mid-1990s. The Count Me In 2 website has now been replaced with the website resourcesformathematics.com.au, which hosts a range of game-based strategies to increase numeracy skills in students. Let's begin by seeing the similarities of the two programs. Count Me In used the Schedule for Early Numeracy Assessments, or SENA, to assess and plan for intervention. As both TOWN and TEN hold their history in the same program, both can use SENA in the same way. While this means that investment in teacher professional learning for Count Me In 2 continues to hold value within TEN and TOWN by using SENA, it is worth noting that often a single assessment tool is not a reliable indicator of mathematics difficulties. As most research indicates, professional learning is integral when it comes to improving student numeracy outcomes. Further to this, developing understanding of students' mathematical thinking could lead to fundamental changes in teachers' beliefs and practices, and that these changes, in turn, reflected in the students' learning. Both TEN and TOWN focus heavily on professional learning to increase teacher understanding of what skills students currently possess and what interventions are needed to increase their numeracy skills. These programs are complementary. TEN is K to 2 and TOWN is 3 to 6. This means that students could theoretically access systems where they need it from within their school, and teachers can support or extend students in their numeracy learning. Conversely, while it's good to have intervention programs that are based in professional learning for teachers, a downside to this could be a metaphoric wall is built and teachers are pigeonholed into the K to 2 or 3 to 6 settings. It could be expensive to retrain teachers as they move between settings within the school. Further to this, these programs are often based in early action for success schools, which in themselves tend to be based in lower socioeconomic backgrounds and therefore harder to retain staff. It's easy to see how training could quickly eat into a school budget. It's important to note that neither of these intervention programs have a particularly solid grounding in research evidence. Initial research undertaken by the former Department of Education and Communities, now Department of Education, found improved NAPLAN results for Years 3 and 5 in 2010 and 2011 within 20 trial schools using TOWN, and a 60% reduction in students considered at risk in K to 2 students at schools using TEN. The research also indicated broad support from teachers that the programs were working. Further to this, research has shown that instructional leaders in early action for success schools are in agreement that programs like TEN and TOWN are working to improve student results. Before we make a call for further research into specific programs, let's take a step back to analyse where these programs fit within research-based strategies for improving numeracy instruction. Both TEN and TOWN are constructivist approach pedagogies that focus on student prior knowledge to guide teaching. The New South Wales Department of Education Numeracy Skills Framework website states that effective numeracy planning relies greatly on direct teaching. This is defined as when the teacher decides the learning intentions and success criteria, makes them transparent to students, demonstrates by modelling, evaluates if they understand what they've been told by checking for understanding, and tying it all together with closure. As can be seen, this closely reflects the teaching strategies used for TEN and TOWN in modern Australian classrooms. Direct teaching itself is based on the cognitive guided instructional pedagogical model. Direct teaching can be seen to fit within this pedagogical context here. Schools identify numeracy needs and a SENA is carried out. Students are grouped together as per the SENA results or plotted along using the learning progressions. Learning intentions are displayed and the teacher models the numeracy skill. Differentiated success criteria are displayed for students to assess their own progress in learning. As students practice their new skills, teachers can feed back, feed forward and feed up to encourage student growth. At the end, a SENA is completed again to track the success of student learning, While more research for TEN and TOWN would be beneficial, it's clear that both programs have a solid foundation in research-based practice. Now let's have a look at how TEN and TOWN differ in their implementation. While both can use a centre to assess initial student need, they quickly move apart after this. TEN is a game-based program that focuses on short, sharp lessons of 10 minutes for small, targeted groups. Conversely, TOWN is a whole class intervention in which students are directly taught more efficient counting strategies over longer lessons for numbers with a larger place value. TEN assumes that any given classroom within the K-2 context will have a range of learners with varying abilities, reflected by 4 distinct learning groups, each with their own game-based strategies to improve numeracy among learners. This allows for a wider range of abilities to be taught within one classroom. Conversely, TOWN appears to separate students into only 2 groups, students who are meeting benchmark numeracy outcomes and students who are not. This could further reinforce the concept of pass or fail mathematics and contribute to maths anxiety. Further to this, if the point of maths interventions is to increase student ability, this should be extended to students at the top end of the spectrum. In this way, TEN caters for a larger range of learners than TOWN. The programs differ further via implementation and feedback methods. TEN can be implemented any time after the first day of training. Students can arrive at a new school and slide immediately into an established numeracy intervention program. Feedback can be given to lower performing students immediately by the teacher, and intervention games can be mixed and matched to continue student interest. In contrast, TOWN has 2 phases, one of which is focused entirely on professional development of teachers for 1.5 terms. This means 15 weeks of teaching time without intervention into numeracy. Further to this, the feedback process for students who continue to not meet benchmarks could be described as arduous, requiring teachers to film and email support staff for advice on intervention. This concept is incongruent to the idea that feedback on student learning should be immediate to have the greatest impact. The final point to make is about the usefulness of TEN when working within a P-6 context. While the intervention program is developed for a K-2 environment, there are elements of the program that easily fit within a preschool setting. The Early Years Learning Framework Outcome 4 states children are confident and involved learners. It goes on to talk about children applying thinking strategies, using mathematical ideas, patterns, and mathematical language. These outcomes are directly relatable to the counting strategies within TEN. Having an early childhood educator trained in TEN as part of the department's education funding model could enhance student learning outcomes from the foundational level. When educators see early counting strategies displayed by children in their classrooms, they would be perfectly poised to introduce games that increase these students' understanding of numeracy, or, at the very least, consolidate the child's understanding of the counting strategies they are using. Before we move on to recommendations, let's recap. TEN and TOWN are both supported by the Department of Education and they're linked to the learning progressions. They're both constructivist, building on both student prior knowledge and teacher professional knowledge. They require professional learning before implementation and, unfortunately, neither of them have that much research to back up their efficacy. On the plus side, both programs fit well into research-based pedagogy for numeracy instruction and, lastly, they both use a version of Centre for Initial Assessment. They differ because TEN is games-based while TOWN is more instructional. TEN has a greater differentiation than TOWN and its feedback is instant, whereas TOWN's can take some time. Finally, TEN can be implemented after training while TOWN is a 2-phase affair that requires a longer training period. Oh, and let's not forget the bonus part that TEN can be included in a preschool environment if there's one attached to the primary school. Let's take a look at the school setting to better understand the recommendations that follow. As you can see from the My School data, 85% of the families come from the top half of income earners, with a significant portion from the top quartile. There are 400 enrolments, including students within the attached preschool. The Aboriginal enrolment sits at the New South Wales mean, and while 1/3 come from a language background other than English, the majority of those people come from Western European backgrounds and speak quite good English at home. What's not stated here is that the school community has funded an instructional leader to help develop the capacity of staff to deliver intervention programs. The initial recommendations are quite straightforward. Teachers can't implement intervention without training first. The school would need to organise the physical resources for the intervention, as well as the human resources to allocate time to collect and collate initial data sets. These are recommendations from both the Department of Education and ASA. In addition to these standard recommendations, there are 3 more that could be specific to this school setting. Firstly, as researchers have pointed out, professional learning is key to improving numeracy strategies. It's important then to create a support network for teachers within the school to continue the professional conversations around the interventions they're using. In fact, these professional conversations are so important that the New South Wales Education Standards Authority and the Australian Institute for Teaching and School Leadership counts them as teacher-identified professional learning hours, as it helps teachers to create, evaluate and improve teaching programs. Next, we need to acknowledge research that indicates that technology is only being used in classrooms in a surface manner, and that even schools with high SES backgrounds are not capitalising on their current technological access to improve student learning outcomes. To capitalise on the access to technology that a higher SES status brings, a series of videos could be created that focus on providing clearly defined learning intentions, success criteria, and instructions for games relating to strategies used in TEN. These videos can be accessed via QR codes. Students can use iPads to scan the code and watch the videos. This means that every group is provided with differentiated instruction at the same time, and the teacher is free to provide feedback for each group. This could help ensure that each TEN session is short, sharp, and focused. Given the opportunity provided by having a preschool attached, the school could capitalise on this and provide extension lessons or games for preschool students. Provided by the instructional leader, this could potentially increase student ability in developing early numeracy strategies. The final recommendation is to provide a bumpered-up wall for students in classes 3 to 6 that link the lessons provided by Town with the quantifying numbers and additive strategies progressions. In this way, learning is made visible to students as they act as instructional resources for each other to improve numeracy outcomes. Students can create and provide examples that accompany the progressions and act as instructional resources for each other. This has the potential to remove the time lag between learning and feedback mentioned in the ASA Ministerial Advisory Group on Literacy and Numeracy report. Before we finish, let's recap the recommendations. There are the obvious first 2 recommendations. After that, capitalise on the technological advantage and create differentiated instructional TEN videos to ensure that learning time is maximised. Next, we'd identify potential to extend preschool students and get the ball rolling on early arithmetical strategies. The last recommendation is to create bumpered-up walls that link learning progressions with the lessons from Town to help narrow the time between learning and feedback. That concludes the comparison of targeted early numeracy or TEN and taking off with numeracy or Town. Thanks for watching.